Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today we're looking at Raioballo Sector, also known as Ankh Space, in the 8th Bright Jewel Command of the new territories of the Outer Rim. I say it's an 8th Bright Jewel Command, but this is one of those annoying sectors that gets cut in half by over-sector lines. The capital planet of Gravlex Med is actually under the protection of 9th Brazen Petard. Now, I do understand why it was split up this way. The over-sector commands were established for the Grand Army of the Republic during the Clone Wars, and only became political units when the galaxy was reorganized into the Empire, at which point the over-sector commands went from being areas of military responsibility to units of military dictatorship. Grand Mobs went from being in charge of fleets and armies to being in charge of the planets those fleets and armies guarded. 8th Bright Jewel includes the Coruscant Dantooine hyperlane because control of that hyperlane was important to isolating Megiddo, while Gravlex Med is left under 9th Brazen Petard because Gravlex Med was a loyalist planet in the Outer Rim who needed all the help they could get, and Brazen Petard had a lot less on their plate, so they could prioritize defending far-flung loyalists where 8th Bright Jewel really had to focus on Megiddo. It makes sense, it's still annoying. Gravlex Med is the homeworld of the Ankhs, these kind of stooped shouldery guys that you might recognize. They're one of those species that most people don't know the name of, but you've seen them in like crowd shots of news broadcasts and stuff. The Ankhs use orbital cannons to fire themselves into space and break the barrier into hyperspace, a weird and awesome form of hyperdrive that they use to colonize planets like Ankhs Minor before contact with the Republic. During the early Republic era, when Ankh Space was not in contact with the Republic, they ran into the Shusugant, a warlike species from a planet of the same name, who fairly quickly conquered the Ankhs and brought many of them to their home planet. Now, records claim that both Shusugant and Gravlex Med are high-gravity worlds, but also that the gravity difference between them seems to have informed the Shusugant's ability to maintain dominion over the Ankhs. One story claims the Ankh slaves brought to planet Shusugant all died, and it does not say exactly why Shusugant control over Ankh space disintegrated, although the Shusugant are prone to internecine feuds, so it might have just been the death of a powerful hierarch led to internal fighting over a successor, during which time outer regions broke away. Another story claims that the Shusugant were able to conquer Ankh's worlds with lower gravity, but were unable to live or fight effectively on Gravlex Med due to its higher gravity, thus saving the Ankhs from total conquest. Either way, the conflict was ongoing when the Republic showed up. The Ankhs were friendly to the Republic, and the Shusugant were not, and that went really poorly for the Shusugant. The Republic never conquered the Shusugant home planet, but they did turn all the surrounding space over to the Ankhs in the newly organized Raioballo Sector, which included not only traditional Ankhs planets like Ankhs Minor, but also all of the surrounding unclaimed space, including planets like Dantooine. Republic exploration into the new territories was sporadic throughout the Old Republic era, and Raioballo Sector got added as a complete sector long before the surrounding space because the Ankhs had already explored a bunch of it when the Republic made first contact, so it was an organized sector surrounded by tons and tons of wild space for most of the Old Republic era. This was a problem for them because of the habit of Sith who'd lost internal power struggles in the Sith Empire packing up their stuff and fleeing into wild space to find some undiscovered planet to colonize, rebuild their power base, and return 20 years later with an army of loyal followers born and raised in a society built around absolute obedience to a single glorious leader. This didn't usually work out for the Sith exile because it turns out one generation of colonial subjects isn't usually enough to take on rivals who control the entire Sith Empire, but it means that the Sith were pretty heavily invested in the region. Raioballo Sector was fully explored, so the Sith didn't ever do the exile colony thing there, but whenever the Sith Empire bubbled over its borders, it tended to expand rapidly into the new territories and cut Ankh space off from the rest of the Republic, and the Ankhs had to stand against the Sith alone. They were at the limits of the Sith Empire's reach, though, which meant by the time the Sith conquered the surrounding territory, they were always focused on defeating the Republic, which made Ankh space a lower priority. That didn't save the planet Nekka from getting virus-bombed to oblivion by Revan's Sith Empire, but Ankh space was never fully conquered by any Sith Empire. Dantooine is probably the most famous planet in the sector. It's an agri-world with a small population, but it's also one end of the Coruscant Dantooine hyperlane, which made it important to cutting off Megiddo from CIS forces in Sereno and their primary forge worlds in the near Dai-Tiron cluster, which is why the Republic fought a decent-sized droid army there in the Clone Wars. According to the story, Mace Windu punched like 1,000 super battle droids to pieces during the battle, which that probably didn't happen. I'm not even sure if Mace Windu was there, but I mean it's possible. Mace Windu led 1st Systems Army, which included 1st Azure Hammer and 2nd Green Mantle, who were in charge of the defense of Coruscant and Corellia respectively. These planets were so rarely threatened that in practice they were reserve forces sent wherever they were needed, which is why Mace Windu shows up all over the galaxy during the Clone Wars. Jumping back in time, Dantooine was also targeted in the war with Revan's Sith Empire. It was home to a small Jedi temple and otherwise sparsely populated, so it was the Jedi temple and the Rakatan ruins that put it on the Sith radar. Those Rakatan ruins also mean the planet must be naturally dark-side aligned, since the Rakatan hyperdrive could only take them to planets with a dark-side alignment. You might think that means the planet is somehow naturally evil, but if you look at dark-side planets, it's like Kashyyyk, Duro, Dantooine, Manan, Tatooine. Some of these places suck, but a lot of them are nice. From what I can tell, planetary force alignment has a bigger effect on force sensitives, who are rare enough to get swamped by other trains in the population in terms of impact on society. But a place like Dantooine will train a much higher proportion of Dark Jedi than normal. Exar Kun, Revan, and Malak were all trained at the Dantooine Temple. Dantooine is also allegedly home to a species of thickly proportioned primitive humanoids called the Dantari. I call bullshit. There's no trace of them anywhere in the rest of the historical record, and they're caveman aliens. Caveman aliens came up a lot in the 12th Cerulean Spear, where they were especially unlikely because that territory was mostly settled in the early Republic era, sandwiched as it is between the Republic, Hutt Space, and the Tion Cluster, the three major powers of that era. But the new territories aren't that much more likely, especially not when we're so close to the traditional borders of Ankh space. Dantooine has never been a major planet, but they've been part of the greater galactic community for long enough that any local species should have figured out air conditioning by now. I guess Tuskens still haven't figured out speeders, so nothing's impossible, but these Dantori guys do not have the documentation the Tuskens do. Dantooine is also famously the site of a rebel base early in the Galactic Civil War. An Imperial plot to track their base down failed a few years after the Aldhani raid, which spooked the rebels into relocating to Yavin, just in case there was some other tracking device they'd missed along with the one they found. There wasn't, and the Imperials didn't learn about the Dantooine base until Leia Organa bluffed with it while held captive on the Death Star. There's all kinds of crazy rumors about stuff that happened in or around that base. Supposedly, there was a secret Jedi cloning facility beneath it, trying to find a way to clone Force sensitives without them going bug-fuck-insane. Supposedly, one of the many Imperials who defected to the rebellion in the aftermath of Yavin was captured while trying to leave Imperial forces on Dantooine, and Wedge Antilles' rogue squadron, including Luke Skywalker, saved him. Supposedly, Darth Vader was captured by the rebels and held prisoner on Dantooine. That definitely didn't happen. He obviously would have told the Imperials about the base after escaping, so it wouldn't have been news to Tarkin that the Dantooine base was abandoned. Some of these stories are plausible, not that one.